What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Player One versus the World, and for a new episode of Life After Strange. I have the absolute pleasure of going back to Arcadia Bay and Life is Strange Before the Storm, and my guest this time is none other than Maura Corsini, who plays Dana Ward in Before the Storm. Maura, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm so good. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm very happy to have you here. I'm very excited to talk to you. Love some of the lines that you deliver as your character in Before the Storm as well. And there's no doubt we'll be getting into that. But I kind of wanted to start with you because, with these kind of interviews, with these podcast episodes, I always do a lot of digging into the actors that I speak to. And I think you got a fascinating insight in terms of you're born in Pennsylvania, grew up in Delaware, you're now in California, and you've been so many places across the state. And then, what generally took you on to the career path that you have now as an actor?
Yeah, it was honestly kind of random. No one in my family has anything to do with the arts or theater, anything like that. But when I was, and especially, I grew up in Delaware, as you said, and Delaware is not the epicenter for acting by any stretch of the imagination. But my parents took me to see a Broadway show. We saw Tom Sawyer when I was 4. We saw it with my brothers and I. And I remember everybody was arguing over who had to sit next to me. No one was. Because, I'm the 4-year-old, I'm going to be annoying the whole time. But I remember vividly just watching so engaged and being like, I don't know what's happening, but those people are controlling all of our emotions and we're cheering and laughing and crying. And I don't know what it is, but I got to do it. And so that's when I planted the seed, and my parents thought it was just a phase, but unfortunately for them, it was not. And then after high school, I went to New York and studied at a conservatory, and then came out to California about a year after that.
No, that's really interesting because I always have some of the actors is it cliche, my story, is it not? I've had parents in there, but the fact that you don't have that background with family members being in the industry is quite interesting. That's how you got into it. And obviously, mentioning that as well, were there any kind of influences in terms of getting into acting, specific actors that you really looked up to or you really enjoyed watching?
Yeah, this is if I ever get to meet the cast of House someday, that show House with Hugh Laurie and it's so funny because granted, it's a really, really good show. But as a kid, I had a very spiritual, weird connection with it. And it was just when TiVo came out. I used to TiVo the episode, and I would you were able to pause it. So I'd pause it and write down all the lines. I would assign myself a character, and then I would set up cameras all around my basement and replay the episode. And I would mute when it was the other person's line, or when it was my line, and then I would unmute it when Hugh Laurie said his line, and I would do that for hours and hours and hours for honestly 6-7 years. And I would email Nina Gold, or what's her name? Amy Lippins, David Shore, all the people on the crew. I would email and be like, I have an idea for an episode. You can use it for free if you cast me. House was my go-to. I had a very weird obsession with it. So that's definitely it.
Oh no, absolutely. And I think there's no weird obsession because there's always that one TV show that everyone connects with on that level. I was with that with Lost.
I love that. Yeah.
I was in college and I watched that for the first time and it changed my life. And I was for every TV show I ever watched now is compared to that, because I'm just it's just unbelievable. So I'm really cool that your experience with Hugh Laurie. And
I love that you have that similar passionate feeling about a show, because not many people do. So I love that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And if J.J. Abrams wanted to cast me, I'll take it, even though I'm not an actor. But obviously, I've brought you on here. I think we need to address the elephant in the room, which is obviously Life is Strange Before the Storm. You were involved with this project. How did you come up, ending up auditioning for this project? What was that experience like? Take us back to that.
So I think it was about a year or two after I had moved to Los Angeles, and I had representation, but one of my biggest pieces of advice for actors is, even if you have great reps, always self-submit. And so I was self-submitting, and I didn't actually know it was video game. I didn't even know it was voiceover. All I saw was Dana. I don't think they said her last name. I don't even think that they said the name of the project because it was very much under wraps. But all I saw was Dana, and that she was a high school girl. They gave a little bit of her character breakdown, and then I just knew it was a lot of Shakespeare. At least that's what the audition was. So I emailed them and was like, hey, I came across this. I'd really love a chance to audition. I self-submitted. I would love to show you what I got. And so they reached back out and they were like, great, here are the sides for the voiceover audition. I was like, oh, this is not what I thought it was. But it was so interesting going in and doing Shakespeare for this voiceover audition. Like, I'm working with two different aspects that I'm not doing every day. I'm auditioning every day, but not for voiceover and not with Shakespeare. So that was very daunting, but I could tell the writing was great. The mood of the room, the producers, the casting directors, they were all really kind, which I promise you do not come across all the time. So it was a great experience from the get-go. It felt right instinctually.
No, that's really cool. We will dig into Shakespeare a little bit, but I like the fact that you mentioned that you should self-submit, and even if you don't have that representation, because I've had a lot of actors on here and they've talked about that experience where it's like, they've put themselves on backstage and LA casting and kind of like gone into that process of it. And I think even who played Chloe Price, Rihanna DeVries, she self-submitted, I think, off just like a Facebook post that she saw, and she got the one of the main characters.
Wow.
So I think it's. Yeah, so I think it's just like very, very valuable advice, and I can completely understand that. And it's quite cool that you got involved with this project. Was there any interest in video games growing up at any point?
My parents were not video game people, meaning they wouldn't really allow us to play video games. If we had spare time, it was go outside and play. But I have 3 older brothers who did like video games and kind of snuck into the basement and did it. But all of my memories are very antiquated video games. Like Sega Genesis is maybe the most extreme that I played on, like Space Invaders maybe, or Zelda, something like that, but nothing that has this sort of graphic, these storylines, nothing like that.
Oh, no, I can absolutely imagine that. And I know some of the actors come on here have no experience with gaming. They always apologize. I'm like, no, it's a job, you're an actor. Like, that's the main thing. You don't have to be that involved in the series. But, you mentioned it there, you had 3 brothers, you have friends, you're a young person. What was the reaction like when they found out you got cast in a video game?
My boyfriend at the time, who I'm still friends with, he's such a gamer. And he was very, very, very excited. He was very excited about it. And then people who I've met throughout the year, especially a lot of people in the LGBT community are will say really kind things and really encouraging things. So it's kind of blown me away how united and strong the community of gamers is. I had no idea. It's actually really interesting. It's been interesting and very welcoming to be a part of it.
Oh, absolutely. This game blew off. I was in the industry when I was reporting it. The first Life is Strange came out and it just took off. And then obviously it's got such a strong LGBT connection with it that I kind of saw that massive fandom emerge. So I can kind of understand you had that experience with people. And I'm really glad to hear that as well. And we're talking about Dana Ward as well. Do you remember when you first saw what she looked like?
I do. I was so shocked and so happy that she kind of looked like me a little bit, just a little bit. And even the mannerisms, because it's crazy. Again, the graphics are so real that even though she's a video game character, she has her own mannerisms, which still can't get over. But all of it made me so excited. I think I was so giddy when I first saw her.
That's cool. What did you make of her appearance, the outfits, and did she match into your head what you thought she would be like?
Yeah, I think the first outfit I saw her in was this pink crew neck sweater, and it did fit with the popular prim and proper cheerleader, but still very kind, and it definitely matched her. What she looked like and what I envisioned definitely matched.
Oh, absolutely. And this is your first VO project. You mentioned it before, and then with this project you get involved with Philip Bache, who's the VO director, who you'd work closely with on that project. What was your experience like going to the booth with him and recording lines for Dana?
It was I can't say enough good things about it. It was so great, especially as someone who hadn't done voiceover before. I've done music and stuff, so I've been in a recording studio, but it's just a different technique. It really is a totally different animal. And so I definitely think he might have sensed my nerves going into it. He was very, very eager to calm me down and make sure I was getting out of it what I wanted, and same with him. It was very collaborative. I had a great experience.
Oh, absolutely. I've heard legendary stories. I ask every actor that's ever come on this series what their experience with Philip Bache is, and they always have a very varying experience in terms of it's always good, but the best way that he got out their potential in VO. So I just wanted to ask what that experience was like. But, this is with Dana as well. How long was the average VO session as well? I imagine that the first episode was the longest that you did your VO for.
I think I want to say there were a few segments of 2-hour sessions, I believe. I think maybe we would go over every once in a while, but I'm pretty sure all of the sessions capped at around 2 hours, which was good because it is a very high energy piece. And so that was a good way to keep it fresh each time we went in. We felt very rested and energized, and it was a good way to do it.
Oh, absolutely. It makes sense. And, with this game, obviously it's episodic, it's released over time. And then you come back for the second episode as well to do lines. Did you know immediately that you'd be coming back for the second episode after you recorded lines for the first one, or did they call you back at a later date?
I didn't know, actually. Yeah, I did. I was called back at a later date. And so, because originally there was another voiceover artist playing Dana. And so I was questioning whether or not the second episode would be even me or not. And so I was very, very eager and so flattered to be able to actually follow through and do that second episode. But yeah, I can't remember. I think maybe a few months at least.
Okay. Yeah, that would make sense. Based on how the episodes came out. And obviously, like, I mentioned it, Philip was your main person to work with in the studio booth, but I've heard from many actors who had their experience on this project that Webb Pickersgill, the co-director of Before the Storm, would usually be there for some of the sessions. Do you ever remember meeting him or interacting with him at any point during those sessions?
I know at one point that there was someone very important that we FaceTimed that could not be there that we put on FaceTime. So I'm now going to assume it's that gentleman. But yeah, being a non-gamer and since I had already booked the job, I didn't do myself the disservice of looking up all of these people's credits, because then I would just get so nervous, because I genuinely admire so many people in this industry that I can get in my head about it. So I tried to take a step back. So I just knew that I was FaceTiming with someone important during my session, but I did not know who it was.
Yeah, I think that would make sense. It probably was Webb. Sometimes he was there, sometimes he wasn't, sometimes he's on over a Skype call. So that does make, that would fit in with it. And, whilst we're in the booth as well, what was the favorite memory for you in the booth? Any standout memories or favorite segments to record?
I think the meow line we did so many times. And I know at first I was like, meow, I didn't know how to go about it. And they were just like, have fun with it. We're going to do 1,000,000 takes. Just go for it. And so I was just meowing for 20 minutes, but it was so fun. Those are the times when you look at your job and you're just like, what am I doing? What is my job? I've just been standing here meowing for 20 minutes, but great if it pays the bills.
Oh no, because that was the next thing I was going to say. Because that's my favorite part of one of the first part of the episodes where Rachel Amber walks into the room with Mr. Keaton, and then you hear Dana do the meow. And I was going to ask that surely wasn't a first attempt take on doing that.
No, it wasn't, and I can't. I wish I could go back and hear all the different variations of it, because obviously that one now sticks in my mind. But no, there were quite a few takes for that.
Yeah, it makes sense as well, because just the way you did it, I was like, oh, 10 out of 10 for me. No, of course. And, before we leave the booth as well, this is actually relating to that. Do you remember crossing paths with any actors before or entering the booth?
Yes. I think, I believe it was the young woman who played Chloe, but I honestly cannot remember, because it was all new to all of us. Yes, brown hair, darker brown hair, I believe.
Yeah, curly.
So just a bit of a raspy voice, if I'm getting that right, or just maybe I'm butchering this, whomever it is, but I just remember walking in and she was finishing up and being like, well, that's how you do it. That's how you do a voiceover. That's awesome. And it fueled me a little bit. It gave me some confidence to go in there and really give it my all. So whomever you are, good job.
It might have been Rihanna, and I just wanted to ask, because sometimes I know actors sometimes cross paths with other actors, sometimes they had no experience meeting them, so I'm glad that you actually got to meet one if that was the case. We mentioned it before, and we talked about Dana in that scene where you did the meow, but there also was a moment where she asks Mr. Keaton, my affections are then most humble, I have no ambition to see a goodlier man, her line. And I know that you're a teacher, and we'll come on to that a bit more about you being a teacher, but what would you tell Dana in that moment about that line, the interpretation?
Ooh, well, the biggest thing is always, as you said, interpretation or analysis is always the first step in acting. So understanding what Miranda's saying. I believe at that point she's talking to her father, who's like, no, you can't date this guy. He's so lowly. And she's like, okay, great. Then I love low. I don't want anybody better. That's what I love. I'm so down for it. And I think even though obviously it's Shakespearean times, you can personalize that and relate. I'm sure all of us have dated somebody that either our parents don't like or our friends don't like. And that feeling, whether you're speaking Shakespeare or not, I think we all have that feeling inside of us at some point.
No, of course, yeah, and it's great, great line. I remember just like that moment when Rachel like brings in Chloe for the interpretation. It's perfectly set up, and we mentioned it as well. We've kind of gone around it. Dana is in the Tempest. She plays Miranda. We kind of talked about it a bit before about the second episode. But were you surprised to see that the fact that this kind of scene was in a video game on this level about like the Tempest?
Completely shocked, and that's why I submitted for this, was because, not that I wouldn't have submitted knowing it was a voiceover role, but I submitted thinking like, wow, this character gets to do Shakespeare and she has this big like background and such an interesting breakdown. I would love to do this. And then finding out, wait, this is for a video game? Like, again, my experience with video games is like Space Invaders. So it's no talking. It's like little beeps and doots and that's about it. So yeah, it's really interesting to see the marriage between film and video games now. It's so cool.
Oh, of course. And like the Tempest is my favorite scene in Before Storm as well. So I'm like, every actor that was involved in it, I have to give them full credit for it. And I have to kind of mention that as well, because like when I brought on Kylie Brown, she played Rachel Amber in this game. She spoke about, they gave a cadence for Shakespeare and in her words, she was shit at Shakespeare. She like openly admitted it. I imagine that you got similar cadence for this when you were learning it. And were you familiar with Shakespeare before this, with like maybe a theatre background or any interest in it?
Yeah. So oddly enough, that's actually a great question, because that was very difficult to approach, because I have Shakespeare training and I had just studied a few years prior, had studied in New York at a conservatory that was very heavy theater based. And we did a lot of Shakespeare. And so I was very familiar with iambic pentameter and stuff. But I also realized while I was analyzing it, like, wait, Dana wouldn't be that good. Dana wouldn't be, not to say that I am that good, but she wouldn't have the vibe of coming out of a year-long conservatory. So like in a way had to get rid of what I knew about Shakespeare and go back to very like preliminary interpretations of it. And then, because again, she's not going to be like this incredible Shakespearean poet and actress. She's just not. She's a high school girl who loves to do cheerleading and has a lot of other interests, but that's not her big thing. So balancing that while still making it watchable was difficult, but interesting and fun.
Yeah, no, of course, because like, when you mentioned there about the fact that these kids are teenagers, and when you see it as well, they're not going to be delivering a 5-star performance with it. They even like intentionally make it awkward as well. So that does make sense. And it must mean, to take all those skills that you learned with Shakespeare and then strip it down.
Yeah. It's like goes so far against your ego. And then it's like, well, it's okay. I'm not actually that good at Shakespeare anyway, so whatever. But yeah, it is interesting to strip it all down.
No, of course. And that's really interesting to hear. And with Before Storm, has there been any interest on your part to kind of like sit down, watch through the entire thing?
So I've watched other people play it, like YouTube videos and whatnot. But I mentioned before I was dating somebody during it, and he had a PC. I have a Mac, but he has a PC. And when they gave me the game, they were like, what console would you like it on? And I was like, oh, how about like a Windows, like a PC? And so we got it for that. And then lovely guy, but we no longer date. And I do not have access to a PC anymore. So I don't know how to play it, to be honest. But I should perhaps invest in it. I'm a little nervous too, because I don't want to get hooked. I can get hooked on things pretty quickly. So I remember playing Sims into the wee hours of the night. So we'll see. But I do want to play it someday.
Oh, of course. No, I know completely about the addiction factor, because I'm like that now. And I'm currently doing a Life is Strange podcast with actors years and years after. So
it's a rabbit hole that I know I'm going to get sucked into. So I'm just kind of separating myself for now.
Absolutely. Were there any favorite scenes for your part on Before Storm?
I definitely think going in and out of the Shakespeare and then talking to Mr. Keaton, because there's two different vocal registers, two different personalities and personas you're trying to display. And going back and forth with that was fun. Like going from the vernacular of Shakespeare to, oh, Mr. Keaton, what does this mean? Like, it was a very fun. I loved that back and forth.
No, that does make sense. And were there any other characters that you liked in Before Storm, aside from Dana?
Other characters, you said?
Yeah.
All of them? I don't know. Like, the two leads, forgive me, Chloe and Rachel?
Chloe and Rachel.
I love their dynamic. It's just so pure and so, like, driven by the heart. I think that would be, those two are most likely my favorite, I would say.
No, it's a good choice, and they are the center of the story, so I kind of understand when most of the actors lean towards them as well. And with this as well, you had the kind of rare opportunity. You picked an established character from the first Life is Strange, like, they brought you in to do the vocals for this. Was there any interest on your part to kind of see what happens about Dana in the first Life is Strange just after you played her?
The turnover was so quick that the first episode I went in, there was a lot less analysis that I did and a lot less research because it was so quick from audition to booking to recording. But when I had time before the second episode, I did go back and watch that. And it's hard on one hand to not imitate what the other actor does. So that's one thing I, of course, was aware of. But I did want to just get the feel of her character and do her a service and make sure that she's not like a totally different vibe for the people who did play that and loved it and want to play it again and still have that feeling.
No, I absolutely understand that because, like, I know with some of the actors that a lot of them did take over characters because of SAG's strike at the time. And I like the fact that, with Before Storm, many of the characters you do see the kind of individually that they stand alone from actors. So fully understand that. And I kind of have to move on to my favorite question, which is, what's your favorite thing about Dana and why? And also, is there anything you wish that you would have seen more from the developers on the character?
I think I want to see more of her interactions with, obviously we see her in this theatrical sense. I want to see more of her interactions with day-to-day life at school and with these people, with Rachel, Chloe, Max, Trevor. But I think my favorite thing about her, she's got a great heart, regardless of the fact that you look at her and you think, is she going to be snobby and snooty? And she's so prim and preppy and popular and the cheerleader, but she's actually got a really big heck of a heart. So that dichotomy is not something you always see. A lot of popular girls are very much written with one note, and it's like, I'm popular, I'm mean. And this was not that. And so the fact that it was so rounded, I would love to dive deeper into that.
No, it's a great shout because I thought you were going to say, like, I wish she was the main role of the Tempest, but
I mean, that works too.
Yeah, fair enough. And we'll move away from Before Storm for the moment because, like, how's life been post Before Storm? Anything that you've enjoyed working on since then? I know we're in the COVID world at the minute, but
yes, there was a few projects lined up right before COVID that, knock on wood, are luckily starting to pick back up. So hopefully that continues. But I did do I actually did a Christian film called Unplanned, and I'm trying to bridge the gap for people between like LGBT and Catholicism or Christianity, things like that. It does not have to be one or the other. They're not mutually exclusive. I've done a Christian film and I am Catholic, but I'm so passionate about the LGBTQ community. And so I love the fact that I got to do both. Not all of the fans for these films and video games like that. I've definitely come across some people who question it and question my sincerity and whatnot, which I understand because the narrative is that they're two totally different things that you can't agree on. But yeah, navigating that is interesting. It has been very interesting. But that's the biggest thing I've done so far. And then, again, a few indie films in the work that hopefully will pick up again soon.
Oh, absolutely. Hopefully they do pick up. And I find it quite interesting that, you had that LGBT project like Life is Strange Before Storm, worked in that, and then you got to go and work on this project as well. Was that after Before Storm or was it filmed during Before Storm?
It was after, yeah. It was about, I want to say about a year after we filmed after we recorded the second episode. I think I booked it about a year afterwards. And then a few months after that, I was shooting in Oklahoma.
Okay, that's really cool. That's really cool. And you know, what I was going to go on to, like, from IMDb, and I know it's not the most reliable source because sometimes it's a bit sketchy here and there. I noticed that none of the roles that you've done since then have been in VO or like specifically gaming. Has there been any like auditions on your side, or have you like, is there any interest to kind of return to that as well when you get the chance?
I would absolutely love to. I think the biggest reason that I haven't been is because I now do have a nice like at-home mic studio setup. But in order to really pursue voiceover, I mean, I got so lucky and so blessed with Life is Strange. But to really pursue it, you have to have like a really good at-home studio and be able to record there. And I didn't have that for so long, but I luckily do now. So I would say in the very near future, I really hope so. It is a very different art, and I know I have a lot to learn in regards to it, but it's so fun. I really have fun with it.
Oh, absolutely. I hope you're involved in more of it. And I like the fact that you invested in it, because I know some of the other actors now have like their kind of own home studio VO projects from there as well. And it'll help as well in the COVID world as well. So fingers crossed that those kind of projects open up. And you mentioned it earlier as well, the fact that you're a singer-songwriter. And this is going to come out a little bit later, but I was doing some snooping like I usually do on my actors. And I found out that you're dropping an album in March.
Yes, at the end of March.
You know, how did you end up getting into the music side, singing, songwriting side?
I've always loved music, but it's been much more recreational for me, mostly because I don't think I had the confidence to do it. But when I was in high school, I had an incredible choir teacher. And I genuinely can't say enough good things about this guy, but taught me so much and gave me the confidence to really pursue it. So I've been pursuing it since then. COVID has kind of given me the guts to just go for it on my own instead of waiting around until I have all of these songs, but why can't I get someone else to produce it? And it's so expensive. Like, well, there's GarageBand and all of there's YouTube tutorials, so why not take it into my own hands? So I'm writing and recording and producing it on my own with my computer and my at-home setup. So, but it's gone it's going well, and it's been really fun and very gratifying just being able to do it all on my own.
Oh no, absolutely. That's really cool. A lot of the actors I do bring on here do have like that kind of music influence, have singing, songwriting there. So I always kind of like love to hear their experience of it. What would you define as your musical style? Like, you know, were there any major music influences on you?
I think, I don't want to say, so I saw a Billie Eilish interview that was like pretty life-changing for me, which is where she was talking about, because someone asked her the same thing, what's your genre? And she was like, I don't have a genre necessarily. I have my own sound, but I don't really know how to define it. It's just like, it sounds like Billie Eilish. And I think in a way, like my music sounds like Maura Corsini. It's got indie influence, but some jazz influence, a little bit of electronic, but it's all been written originally on an acoustic guitar. So it's got a lot of different influences coming in. But yeah, I'm excited to see each song is a little bit different. So I'm excited to see which ones get more traction than the others, but I'm happy with all of them, and I'm writing them for myself. Normally I write music for other people to enjoy, which I know it sounds selfish not to do that, but this is the first time I'm just writing what I want to write and putting it out there. And if people like it, then that's amazing. And if not, I'm still proud of it.
Oh no, of course, absolutely. I understand, like, if you say, like, you know, my influence is Bob Dylan, then every song sounds like Bob Dylan. You're a bit like, you kind of dug yourself in the hole.
Yeah.
I completely agree with the Billie Eilish ones. I watched some of her interviews with like Vanity Fair where they do it 4 years separately. And it's like every year they ask her
that. It's one of my favorite ones.
Yeah, I love the format. I think it's brilliant. I love that every time they bring her back as well, it's like the same questions on like her Instagram followers and stuff. Yeah. And it's just mad when you see her go from like 17 to 21 with like the increase of like how many followers. Blows my mind.
Incredible.
Well, I have to ask you as well, you know, one of my favorite things with Before Storm was the soundtrack. It was an incredible soundtrack, especially from the music side. They had Daughter involved. I imagine that you must have listened to it.
I absolutely love Daughter. Like, even before I did this or whatever, Youth has always been one of my favorite songs. Actually, when I first moved out here, we had to do this exercise in acting class where we sing a song, but we treat it like a monologue. And I did Youth by Daughter. And I was like bawling by the end of it just because it's just such a powerful song. It's so like hauntingly beautiful, which I think is a good way to describe a lot of the soundtrack. Haunting but beautiful. But yeah, having Daughter involved. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it blew my mind. I became so hooked on them after like I heard Numbers, and like every other song like since then has like been Daughter and like repeat. Like I listen to something.
Yeah, Numbers and Daughter. I go back and forth between Numbers and Daughter.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I understand that. So really glad to hear it from another Daughter fan. Um,
Yeah.
you know, and we're kind of going to go on something else. You know, I mentioned it before that you're a teacher, and a lot of the actors I do bring on here, I was asking for advice, but obviously you teach improvisation and scene study to children at Young Actors Space. And for anyone watching as well, for context, Yaz is considered one of the best acting schools for young students in LA. What's your experience like teaching kids based on your own experience, like, you know, how far you've got in the industry so far?
Yeah, it's so cliche because I know I've heard teachers say this, and every time I've just kind of rolled my eyes. But teaching actually really helps me learn so much. I learned so much from these students who are too young at this point to be corrupted by society and societal standards, and they're so much more willing to be creative. But I'm giving these students advice all the time, and it's, you know, I hear it too, and I have to learn to take my own advice, and I've gotten to that point, which is lovely. So it's been a great learning experience, and yeah, I've taught from as young as 4 years old to like mid early 20s. But right now I'm teaching 12, 13, and 14-year-olds, which is one of my favorite ages. Because again, they still have that creativity, but they also have that intellect, and they're not totally influenced by society just yet. They're not corrupt just yet. And it's so fun to grow with them and learn from them. I did a scene the other day with this girl, and she had me just bawling, just crying so hard. And she's like 12 or 13. Like, it's such a fun, gratifying job.
Oh no, I can absolutely imagine that as well. Like to teach younger generation of kids like that, and like from the experience that you learn from them. Because I've had like one of the child actors on this series, and it's mad to think that, you know, I'm this old, and when I'm speaking to them, and that they're in the video games, and they speak so, like, you know, they're so well into their craft, and they understand what they're doing as well. So I always have a big admiration for that. But I have to ask you as well, how did you get into this role of like teaching? Yes, like what was that kind of like? What took you down that road?
It was not intentional, but when I was moving out here, I had a recommendation from a friend's mom who her daughter had gone to Yaz and just absolutely loved it, had a lot of success there. And so I tried it out, and after about a year and a half, I would say, or a year there, the owner of the studio asked me to shadow him to teach some younger classes. And so I shadowed him for, I think, about a year, I would say, and then I was on to 4 to 7-year-olds. And then after that, I just kind of kept building up as far as ages and whatnot. But yeah, it was unintentional, but it definitely beats the restaurant business. I will tell you that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Hospitality is a brutal business, so I can completely understand that.
To say the least.
Oh yeah. And you know, I have to kind of mention this before we move on from this. You work with younger kids. You were in Before the Storm video game. Surely that you've mentioned the fact that you played Dana Ward in a video game has come up at some point.
So when it came out, the classes that I was teaching were a little bit too young. And now I don't know if they know now. I don't know. So many of these kids are just into like Fortnite or some like zombie apocalypse game that they're just like, oh, we don't care. The biggest fan base that I've come across have been like people my age, which is super, super cool. But yeah, no, I have not. I'll have to brag to my students a little bit more, I guess.
Oh, absolutely. You should just mention it, like having a video game, like interest, and everything will spike just from that.
I'll start every class. Like, guys, just a reminder, I'm super cool. I played Dana Ward. Okay, let's begin.
Exactly. No, it'd be brilliant that. And with where you're at now as well, you know, you teach acting, you're a musician, songwriter, you're an actor. What's the long-term one for you personally? Like, is there anyone that you really want to branch down the most out of all those that you're doing?
I 1,000% say that acting is my number one. Always has been. I think always will be. But I also really want to get into, and I'm starting to get into, documentary filmmaking. Mostly just spreading awareness about various causes that I feel passionate about. One of them is we're all familiar with the Harvey Weinstein scandal, but I am working on a piece now about Dan Schneider, who is basically the Harvey Weinstein of Nickelodeon, which is 1,000 times worse. So I'm trying to, acting at this point it used to be like a bit more stressful. And now because I have that filmmaking that is very stressful, I'm able to look at acting as more of a fun, relaxing thing, which, believe it or not, is actually paying off. And I'm doing better work because I'm, I guess, just more relaxed with it. But I am still acting. I always will. But yeah, documentary filmmaking is definitely what I'm most passionate about at this point.
Oh, I completely understand that. And when you brought up Dan Schneider as well, obviously I grew up watching Nickelodeon with like Drake and Josh. And I remember seeing something about him and it just like clicked my inkling. And then when I read all the stuff about him and the things that people had dug up, I was like,
yeah,
wow. I was like, this is really, really quite disturbing, like on that kind of level. So
it goes so deep, and there's so many people, whether or not every single person is directly involved, there are still so many people who knew about it and paid off these victims and made them shut their mouth and hired this organization called Black Cube to stalk them and threaten them and just horrific stuff. And it's happening to kids. Like, it's so beyond. Yeah. Anyway, I digress. I know this is not what the channel is, but it is something I just feel so passionately about. And I'm happy you know about that. I'm glad the word is getting out, because it was being stepped on for so long.
Yeah, it's come about more because I saw it floating around on Reddit a lot more, and then I kind of like read someone like break down extensively everything that's come about of it. Obviously some of it, some of it can't be proven. Some of it's still like allegations at this point. But I just found it really interesting to read it, and like obviously because of the context of where he works, and like it kind of reminds me of Elliot Page and Brett Ratner, if you remember that on the X-Men free shoot, because Elliot spoke. Off the top of my head, I believe Elliot said that Brett Ratner kind of like almost tried to oust that person as being, gay, because Elliot did come out as gay later on. Wow. And then dropped things. And Brett Ratner does have a bad rep for this. So like when you kind of like realize some of these people.
Wow. Oh man. Poor Elliot. I did not know that.
It's absolutely mad. So I kind of seeing that. But you mentioned that with documentaries and all that. Who would be your go-to for documentaries when you watch them?
Oh man. Okay. This obsession definitely started with the Serial podcast, which I know isn't a visual documentary, but same essence of it. But I was listening to, Sarah Koenig's podcast Serial, especially the season about Adnan.
Exactly.
Yeah. Have you listened to it?
No, well, I only listened to it when I got into my journalism class. So like, I think it was 2016. I was told about Serial and I like listened to it. And obviously the main character was called Adnan. Yeah. I was like, oh, well, it's like, it was meant to be just to listen to this.
Hey, he's innocent, I think. So you're good.
Yeah.
But yeah, that got me into it. And then just there's just so many like, I mean, Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, it feels like there's a new documentary out all the time, but it seems to be the only thing that's not too heavily censored. You can actually say things against mainstream media without having repercussions, or at least it won't get canceled or hidden. Like, there are a lot of stuff out there. I mean, the Epstein documentaries, the Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell documentaries are hard to watch, but so important. So I'm definitely into the darker documentaries for sure.
Oh no, I completely understand with you, because like I watch a lot of documentaries and I find it like even with Netflix they do some great ones, but then they're so like marred with other controversy, because they did one on the Ripper, the Yorkshire Ripper here, and apparently that was meant to be called Once Upon a Time in Yorkshire, but then they changed it to the Ripper last minute, which annoyed every single family that was involved, because the Yorkshire Ripper was like a glamorized name for him in the media.
Wow. Okay.
And they don't want to own up to the fact that that's what the killer was referred to, and they just thought it very like distasteful. And then last minute, because I think something happened in Netflix, they decided to change the name from Once Upon a Time in Yorkshire to just the Ripper. Wow. So like, and as I said, like, it's such sensitive subjects on so many things. So I kind of like, when I'm watching things, I always have to like take it with that kind of point of view where it's like, I don't really want to sit there and like watch the 16th Ted Bundy documentary and like it's the same, and it's just glamorizing someone who shouldn't be glamorized in any sense of the word.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that. That's so true, because like if you're doing that, shows though people who are doing documentaries to make an entertaining documentary versus people who are trying to make documentaries to do good by the victims and like spread awareness and not glorify, like you said, glorifying Ted Bundy. And I could not agree more with that. There are so many documentaries that go too far into trying to make money that they lose the essence of what they're, made for in the first place.
Oh, absolutely. I think there's like a newspaper here when Zac Efron was in the Ted Bundy one, and they were asking him, I think it was him, the director, and they're asking him, like, do you feel like you're glamorizing the killer? And they kind of like were so hesitant to answer it, but you kind of like, you have to own it. You are involved in this project. Are you glamorizing him? You know what the intentions of the project are. So that's why I'm like kind of like with documentaries. I'm glad that we had this very interesting conversation, and I think we'll swing things back over here. And before we kind of head towards the end as well, I kind of wanted to ask you, you're still very young. Any actors you really want to work with in the future? Dream actors?
Stanley Tucci has always been a big one for me. Stanley Tucci, Hugh Laurie, just to fulfill my childhood obsession, obviously. And Stanley Tucci, Hugh Laurie, Annette Bening would be fantastic. I think I might be like too scared and run away, but if I could convince myself to do it, then Annette Bening as well.
No, of all very good choices, and a thumbs up. Hopefully the Hugh Laurie one I'm definitely hoping for as well. Just
fingers crossed. Oh my gosh, I can't even think about it right now.
But as I said, we're coming towards the end. So Life is Strange potentially has a TV show in the works. God only knows what's going to happen to it. But I use it as my kind of question here. I know that you would love to play Dana, but you're not allowed to in this show. So instead, I'm putting you in the role of the casting director. Who would you put in the role of Dana Ward, and why?
I would put, I'm going to butcher her last name. It's either Denver, maybe it's Denver, Caitlin Denver or Caitlin Dever or Dever. She was in that show Unbelievable, and she was in Booksmart. She just has like, because I'm going to be totally honest with you. When I see other actors my age, I'm like immediately jealous and like looking for flaws. But that girl has no flaws. She is so real. She's so herself. Her comedic timing is unbelievable. That's also the name of the show she was in. But she's also phenomenal with dramatic work. She can flip right back and forth. And I could see her. She has the same look. I could see her doing those Shakespeare lines and killing it. So yeah. I cast you, Caitlin Denver or Dever, whatever your last name is.
No, very good shout, and hopefully get a last name for this. But good shout. Maura, we're coming to the end of the show now. I always let my guests have a kind of final say, send a message to the Life is Strange community about their experience. So I'll let you take it from here.
I did want to say something that, and this, especially in a culture of so much like exclusivity, this was really surprising to me. But for someone who isn't part of the gaming community, I again was welcomed with such open arms and accepted wholly, and there was so much enthusiasm surrounding the content of the video game. And so my biggest thing is honestly, thank you. Like, that's one thing that people are scared of who aren't gamers and go and do these voiceover video games is, okay, is this going to be received okay? Am I understanding the tone correctly? And I was just welcomed with such open arms, and I love the enthusiasm. I can't get enough of it. So just a big thank you.
No, absolutely. Thank you for a very wonderful message. And I think that's where we call it time on this episode. Guys, I hope you enjoyed watching. Maura, thank you so much for coming on. I'm really happy to have you here.
Happy to be here.
Of course, absolutely. Guys, please leave a like, comment, subscribe. It really does help with the channel. I had a really wonderful guest on today. Hopefully more to come. Take care. We'll see you soon, guys.